That title and the title of my book, our book, co-authored, some find jarring and maybe overstated. What are these clowns talking about? But the fact that there's a consensus, I mean a liberal consensus among experts in the field of oral presentation, oral advocacy, that for most Americans, even educated, very bright folks among us, there is a disconnect, and a serious disconnect, between their ability to conceive their thoughts and messages and contra-wise, their ability to articulate them comfortably, confidently, competently, persuasively. Big difference with most Americans. Maybe a huge majority face that disconnect. And that's what I want to talk about. Why? Why would that be so? Doesn't seem to make any sense. The really bright, able people, so many of them, struggle with oral presentation. They don't do it very well, and worse than that, they've convinced themselves they didn't do it very well. They didn't like it. They don't ever want to do it again. They want to run from it every chance they get. Why? And second, I want to talk a fair amount about way out. Everybody can be an acceptably good oral presenter. And everybody in this room can be darn good. It is not rocket science. There's the essence of the answer. The gold standard of how to be a better speaker in any setting. Certainly not just trial. Aristotle, my God, wasn't even a trial lawyer. In any setting was the essence of what the classics taught. Aristotle, Thucydides, Xenophon, Cicero, Demosthenes. The essence of what they taught boils down to straightforward, simple, but mandatory propositions. We have never improved upon the gold standard of classical record. It has gone away 400 years. It has died. It always comes back. And right now we are at a big upswing as trial lawyers and others just keep going back and pay our stuff. Let me start with, can we begin to put a around, give criteria, principles for the speech we remember. Think of all the speeches you ever heard. What distinguished the speech you remember? Two things. One is the speaker made you want to listen most of the time, whatever rhetorical devices he or she was employing. And second, there was something in it, enough, in essence, be it some analytically brilliant thing or a story that was exactly applicable that you remembered 2 days later. Test, remember your speech, 2 days later. What would you tell your husband happened at that speech? Now you're talking about it. Now you're way at the top of great advocacy. I'd love to start right here on that point. Two guys had to make essentially the same speech. The task for these two guys was the same. We are in a huge financial crisis, and a leader has to convince us we'll be all right. Panic is in the air. Worry is in the air. We need a leader who will say something we listen to and is memorable. Right? That's the task. Roosevelt, fireside chat. I won't play all this, of course, just a little bit of it. Listen, you kind of want to listen to this guy. His point on a difficult and dangerous set of circumstances is common sense talk. It's literally fireside.
First of all, let me state the simple fact that when you deposit money in a bank, the bank does not put the money into a safe deposit vault. It invests your money in many different forms of credit, in bonds, in commercial paper, in mortgages, and in many other kinds of loans. In other words, the bank puts your money to work to keep the wheels of industry and of agriculture turning round. A comparatively small part of the money that you put into kept in currency.
This program will be built on
to talk about that in common talk. The banks are having a run. They don't have billions of dollars in green things to hand you. They don't. So there's a total panic. There are lines around the street and all of that. And he's explaining, look, we don't keep them. We're worth it. We can get it. We're not going to be able to give you all your money. That's not the way the system works. And in common talk, he explains that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And people listened. And the banks had been closed that day and the next 2 days. But they opened on Monday. And we got through. Thank you. Geithner. Man, are we in trouble in early 2009. Everything looks horrible. And here comes a new Secretary of Treasury that we don't know very black, super able, but he's got the same job. People are panicked. Get out there and calm down the fear, Secretary Geithner. This is what happened.
This program will be built on the Federal Reserve's Term Asset-Backed Securities Loan Facility. It was announced last November with capital from the Treasury and finance from the Federal Reserve. We've agreed to expand this program to target the markets that are critical for small business lending, for student loans, for consumer and auto finance, and for commercial mortgages. Now, in addition, because small businesses are so important to our economy, we're going to take some additional steps to make it easier for them to get from community banks and from large banks. By increasing the federally guaranteed portion of Small Business Association Administration loans, and by giving more power to the SBA to expedite loan approvals, we believe we can turn around the dramatic decline in SBA lending we've seen in recent months.
Instead of here. What was the difference? Within 4 hours, the stock market of the United States dropped 380 points. It was the second most precipitous drop in the history of the stock market. In a speech designed to encourage us, we're going to get through it. It did the act. Polar opposite. Unbelievable. What was the big difference? One, these I call the 3Ds. Roosevelt's speech was deliverable by him. He knew there were easy words in there. He knew he had a theme. He knew we could explain it in common talk. Why every one of those banks doesn't have $100 million of green thing. And he knew we could explain it. He was confident. I could do this. Geithner's got all these gigantic words that got no actuarial backs, security, this and that. Nobody have any idea what he was talking about. Do you feel 1% more confident that we got this? And I can go explain it to my husband. No way. It wasn't deliverable by him. It wasn't digestible by you. It probably was digestible by other PhD economists. I'm not sure that it was. A lot of them didn't like it. Maybe they understood what all these loan facilities were going to do. SBA kept sound like a French word or something like SBA. Mispronouncing words, rocking, looking over here, then here, reading every single word. And that's part of the problem of delivery. You can't play a bigger pay at a bigger loan than to drop the stock market 300 feet. I end this part with that ragingly imperative sentence. One thing, an oral presentation should not be thought of as, and it is not, a red essay. Anytime you approach, it's fine to write it out in advance and edit it and think about it. But anytime you're going to get up and read back and forth like one of those kids bobbing down to the water and back, there's no way to be powerful, moving, convincing, or significant. You have got to learn how to get away from that security market by reducing, by practice, reducing your speech to bullet points, cheap read the PowerPoint as I will today for the whole hour. They better be done right. But yeah, then you can just talk to people. It's the ballgame. In most, the one place that this never happens is academic papers read to a group of academicians. They say, I can't read, nobody listens. I can't think of another setting or being addicted to your notes. Look it up. There goes eye contact by definition. There will be no gestures when you're reading a speech. There will be no difference in cadence. There never is. You've got to get away from addiction to those notes. And that doesn't mean you don't care about good writing. You can write it, you can edit it, you can do whatever you need to. Practice, practice, practice. Then at game time, you got to be able to get away from it. Just use bullet points. Biggest point I have the whole day is that one. I asked why, and it quite couldn't happen to a PhD, except a big deal PhD, Secretary of the Treasury. How could that have happened? A speech that bad. For not the only speech that bad I've heard. Here's what's going on. We do not teach oral comfort, or oral power, or oral charm. We don't teach it. It has been relegated to a point of American education. Almost no colleges or universities require it. We're on the way at the University of Virginia, and I hope next year we're going to be very close to it. And some smaller colleges require it, or have lots of classes that even grade on the basis our people have worked and delivered. But basically, in our classes at UVA, and Isaac comes up to me, who's in my class last summer, we used to have a show of hands. How many at a wonderful law school with wonderful undergraduate backgrounds, where they wouldn't be there, probably went to good high schools, how many have had any training in speaking or any real practice? And I said, you can count debate and theater and lots of things in all under your head. For years, I was at under 5%. 95%. Nobody ever taught me. Nobody ever graded me on the basis of it. I don't know anything about it. And it shows up on day one. A lot of reading, a lot of very noticed people. And Isaac will confirm that by week 13, closing argument, that class has just ballooned to the point where grading is there. We have a blasted meetings. We can't go over a beat block, try to meet us. They have improved. Everybody's improved by 100% at least. Even those that started, as Isaac did, way up here. Everybody's got a little better. Second, Nielsen just releases a report that the average high school student, survey of 1,000, sends or receives in 1 month 3,300 text messages. We are approaching a world in which half of our waking life are consumed by messing around with the computer or one of those projects. It's getting much worse. That's how we used to learn how to talk to each other. Was talking to each other over coffee, debating with each other, arguing, whatever. Not when half the time it's all bad grammar, misspelled, firing off, text. Hadn't been good for developing comfort and confidence oral together. Glossophobia. Psychologists have done this study many times. 80% of educated adults have a literal, diagnosable fear of public speaking called glossophobia. It's bigger than all other phobias combined. Half of the 80 get physically sick before they speak. Nothing compares to the fear of speaking. Nothing. And the upshot is people run from it. And when they do it, they don't like it because they haven't been taught. And then they really run from it. Because they think they were less than that day, speaking to the firm or the practice group or wherever. It's a big deal being afraid of public speaking. And it's easy to surmount. Nones addiction, I was just talking about. Marginalized value. One reason oral stuff hasn't been taught in some schools by some professors really does go back to a war between the two guys, Plato and Aristotle. Plato feared and hated rhetoric. He came to the view late in life that he needed democracy. He thought people were too dumb. He was worried about the bad man. What if you, Aristotle, teach a guy to be a dazzling speaker? What if he turns out to be a snake artist or a charlatan, a huckster? And how about the bad audience? Because he thought the audience was not smart enough, educated enough to come to sound views. And therefore, it would be easy for a bad man to incite them, inflame them. And he turned on democracy big time before he died. Those two guys didn't speak for the last 10 years of Aristotle's life. Plato had been his guide, his teacher, his mentor. And this struggle, this view of Plato's, that public speaking and rhetoric is affirmatively bad, that knowledge should be something capable of being written down with scientific, mathematical precision. He was great in that world, so was Aristotle. But he came to the mathematical view. Things that can be demonstrated with certainty are the true things. Aristotle said, wait a minute. We make decisions in the public square in Greece. We got to be able to talk to people. And there are some things that can't be written down. How to deal with your children, how to personal crises. A whole lot of stuff is going to depend on, needs to, common sense, and the ability to project judgment, common sense. And so he wrote the book, The Rhetoric, and became the leader of rhetoric, and still is known as the leader of rhetoric. Those are taught. Many college professors are on the Plato side. Go talk to someone. We have to read in our job at UVA. We have to read the student reviews of all the faculty. Every time some are having trouble, and they will be people who will cross-examine. I know this from my undergraduate experience, and we tried to get this required at my undergraduate school standard. We finally did. Those that really weren't getting very good at student reviews were, without exception, almost say, who cares about that? Who cares about being a good presenter in class or speaking? It's all who can write the best and can think very well. Maybe that harkens back to the fact that many of them weren't trained either. Maybe they're defensive about it. I don't know. But there's a Plato wing in most of academia that just doesn't see the importance of it, or maybe thinks it's positively a disservice to humanity to be effective public presenters. But to wrap this part, the happy end of everything I've said so far is very negative. I got that. Improvement is almost instantaneously attainable. I keep looking thinking, you guys that they're going to confirm this. Everybody jumps just by week 6 out of 13. They're away from notes. They're comfortable. And by week 13, closing argument. I literally had tears in my eyes a couple of times. The students have come that far just by being taught the rudiments, the basics, being videotaped and doing it every week and getting critiqued. It takes one term. And the improvements, everybody can get good. Second, nobody ever, once you've reached a new level of comfort or power or persuasiveness or whatever, nobody ever goes back. Never seen it happen. Every week, everybody's back. And nobody goes back to reading and thinks this is fun, now I'll do that again. No way. They learn they don't like it. They like themselves when they are following classic rhetoric tips, which I'm just swiping here today. None of this is profound. It's just I would learn. Yeah, we have had 2,000 students at UVA, and I guarantee you those propositions have been proven 2,000 times. Excellence doesn't matter. For those who have, this is just a sidelight. Gee, it's neat to be able to, oh, so-and-so is a good public speaker, and that's kind of nifty, but it's a little sidelight, being an effective speaker. Once you leave the Howland College of Academia, you're going to be judged most of the time time by folks here, by neighbors, by the PTA, by your kids, based upon what you are saying and doing while you're speaking. Sure, it's important to be brilliant and to write well, but most of the time, you're not going to have that written paper in front of somebody and say, you read this, and then you'll see how smart I am, and then we'll talk. You go to the board meeting, should we sue or settle? That's not a reading thing. That is, all right, Sayler, what do you think? It's entirely an oral exercise. You got to be good. In everything. Neighbors are going to decide what to think of it. The cut of your jib. Evaluation around here can be based very much on comfort, persuasiveness while you're speaking. So that, getting that straight would help a lot blow up the black hole of American education. They can get that later, but they don't. Therefore, why we wrote the book. That is our thesis. Essentials of classical rhetoric are 4. They're just 4 of them. It's called the trilogy, and I've added one because it was also important to them. So I make it a quadrology or whatever that is. Classical rhetoric, ethos, pathos, logos, delivery. They are mandatory, and you have to understand each of them. If you really do, and don't violate the tenets, you're a speaker.
Yeah.
Let me set that up by showing what doesn't work, what violates them all. The contest is a leading candidate in the United States. He's ahead, second of 8. He's got 2 problems. He's unalterably opposed to the death penalty, and polls show 66% of voters won't go that far. Many don't like it very much, but don't want it off the table. 66%. And he's perceived to be cold fish. Very smart. But where's the where's the warmth? Where's the power? Cold fish against the death penalty in all cases. So Bernie Shaw, CNN News, decides to set him up. Didn't tell him this question was coming. Suppose Kitty, your wife of 35 years, just been and murdered. Now what's your position on the death penalty, Marty? This is what happened. It didn't change American history. It changed at least 8 years of American history. 12.
Governor, if Kitty Dukakis were raped and murdered, would you favor an irrevocable death penalty for the killer?
No, I don't, Bernard, and I think you know that I've opposed the death penalty during all of my life. I don't see any evidence that this should be a deterrent, and I think there are better and more effective ways to deal with violent crime. We've done so in my own state. It's one of the reasons why we have had the biggest drop in crime of any industrial state in America, why we have the lowest murder rate of any industrial state in America. But we have work to do in this nation. We have work to do to fight a real war, not a phony war against drugs, and that's something that I want to lead, something we haven't had over the course of the past many years, even though the fight has been, at least allegedly, in charge of that war. We have much to do to step up that war, to double the number of drug enforcement agents, to fight both here and abroad, to work with our neighbors in this hemisphere. And I want to call a hemispheric summit just as soon after the 20th of January as possible to fight that. We also have to deal with drug education and prevention here at home.
Remember the question. He barely lost that election. Hence, George Bush Sr. was elected. And I think it's fair to say that Bush Sr. does not win. There's no way Bush Jr., a part owner of the Texas baseball team, is going to become your president for 8 years. That answer was a 12-year answer. It was time to be an advocate. It's a tough position he's taking, but he believes it. And look what he did. And I want to take just a minute shot at what I think would have changed 12 years. What went wrong? Start with ethos. Ethos means manifesting good character and likability. If you don't like me, or trust me, right now, I'm not going to get you back. I am dead. Any trial lawyer that loses the first couple of days, it's not going to win the case on trust and likability. Likability is a very underrated thing for sure. That's the ethos. I like the guy, or I don't like him. It's ballgame stuff. Therefore, it was put. Folks better like you and trust you, or you're in deep trouble. The killers. How to defeat it? Overstatement, misstatement, cocky, arrogant, inaccuracy. This is just a fun one from the campaign. I can't resist. The early in the campaign, May of 2011, Congressman Ryan has just come out with his voucher plan, his budget cutting plans, and he's getting a lot of attention. New wants to run for president, even back then, May of 2011, and Ryan's getting all the ink. So he holds up his hand and says, "I go on meet the president, 9:30 on Sunday morning to talk about that." And he set up the question, and he got it. So this is what happened.
Do you think that Republicans ought to buck the public opposition and really move forward to completely change Medicare, turn it into a voucher program where you give seniors some premium support and so that they can go out and buy private insurance?
I don't think right-wing social engineering is any more desirable than left-wing social engineering. I don't think imposing radical change from the right to the left is a very good way for a free society to operate. I think we need a national conversation to get a better Medicare system with more choices for seniors.
Okay, that's the kickoff of his campaign. He's going to attack Ryan, and he starts to say what his affirmative idea is. Took a little flack for that answer that afternoon, and the next morning, Monday morning. Holds up his hand and gets an invitation to go to Fox News at 8 o'clock Monday night. Having done that, 40 million people heard him. Okay? 40 million. He gets to go on Fox News at 8 o'clock Monday, 36 hours later. Here's what he did.
And so we say on the record, any ad which quotes what I said on Sunday is a falsehood.
To my knowledge, it's never happened in the history of American politics or anywhere else. And I like to say that I'm not creating, causing a tort, a falsehood now, because I played him word for word in Technicolor. That may be a thought, but I'm committing a falsehood. I didn't quote him. I just let him fly. Gosh darn it, why don't you make a mistake like that in trial or anywhere? You got to say something other than that. That's a killer. The goal, all right, that's what I do, is to project competence, balance. Yeah, balance, big deal. Make people think this person's thinking on both sides. It's fair enough. Can you think of some presidential candidates that didn't meet that test in the last 2 years? It's huge. You got Reagan, come on. Reagan, he did project that very well. You kind of had to, no matter what your politics, where you kind of don't like the guy, because he seemed under control, warm. Funny. This is one of his classic moments when everybody was out. He was a little too old to run for president the second term, and he was asked that at the second debate with Monday.
I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience.
And he did things like that a lot. Guy was a good figure and very strong on ethos. He sure was a big part of his people. I couldn't have liked him better after that answer than before he gave it. How could you turn to your spouse and said after that, I think I'm going to vote the other way, but God, I really trust that guy. I really like that guy. He really moved me. That answer about drugs coming in from South America. His wife's over here, dead. Pathos. Engage emotions. Yes. Hugely important. At the right time, at the right moment, in the right way, to engage your own genuine, and they have to be emotions, when you're pretty sure they will connect with the audience's genuine emotions. Listen to all the footnotes that were in that letter. better be darn sure before you invoke at least extreme emotion, pathos, that it's perceived to be your real feeling and that most of your audience is going to be on the same wavelength. Because what happens when you misuse pathos and overuse it or misuse it? Two horrible things can happen. One is an audience can say, I don't trust that guy. I think he's making it up. I think he's trying to rip at my heartstrings and I'm mad about it. There goes what? Class. I used to like the guy, now I don't. He's cheating by trying to get at my heart. A. Other bad thing is an audience may say, that speaker is simply out of emotional control. He's so fired up that their witness judgment is calm, or her judgment, or calm. Just the gut has just transcended, trumped everything. There goes what? Ethos, belief, and the confidence and confidence of the speaker. Those, look, in American history, great emotional, even kind of sentences, great sentences, are part of us. Those babies moved it. They sure did. But watch out, said Aristotle, for the misuse. You can't do any better than this one. Bean is ahead in the primary some years ago. But in Iowa, I'm sorry. And that night, first primary, small state election, that night he goes out and does this. And that was the end of the campaign.
Not only are we going to New Hampshire, Tom Larkin, we're going to South Carolina and Oklahoma and Arizona and North Dakota and New York. We're going to California and Texas and New York. And we're going to South Dakota and Oregon and Washington and Michigan. And then we're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House.
And said his campaign's over. What the world are you talking about? Went on the TV, and by the next morning, the newspapers were afire with the question, do you want that guy's finger on the black? That is what you think. All right, that's Aristotle turning over. I told you guys to watch out. This one is just fun. Did it work? Didn't it work? It's just fun because I don't know. It was a warm-up speech for the president's speech at the convention, the acceptance speech at the Democratic convention. Governor Granholm, very smart lady, in fact, but she did something extremely theatrical that day. I happen to think it worked okay, but I was thinking Aristotle listening to it. Is he going to put off a whole lot of people? She went theatrically wild here that day. Here it came.
Mitt Romney, he saw the same crisis, and you know what he said? Let's try to go bankrupt. Now, sure, Mitt Romney loves our lakes and our trees. He loves our cars so much they even have their own elevator. But the people who design and build and sell those cars, well, in Romney's world, the cars get the elevator and the workers get the shaft.
Up to you. I know for sure I don't have the courage to do anything like that. It certainly isn't my style. Dukakis, pathos? She's dead over in the corner. Doesn't mention her name. Remember that? Nothing. A little something about Massachusetts we've done a different way. It's gone right now. Draw focus. For God's sake. You gotta say something about the beloved wife of 35 years old. Gotta be in it. Logos, the third, exciting the mind with reason. We wildly underestimate the degree to which sane human beings, and they don't have to be world-class Rhodes Scholars, sane human beings are moved by logic, never forget it. Logic. It has to be understood and comprehensible. People think, not as linearly as we do in this room, but they think linearly. They get contradictions. They get changes in position. The trial lawyer can say their first witness after cross really took this position. Witness 6 after cross fundamentally took why. Those two propositions, ladies and gentlemen, cannot both be right. Either one is wrong or both is wrong. You can hear a pin drop when you're talking about a contradiction or an inconsistency or something doesn't follow. Cab drivers are linear thinkers, everybody, if you can make them understand it. That's the challenge, to make sure you're not speaking over the head of whomever about whatever you're talking about. Logos is huge. I love, the first thing I would say about logos is the key to effective logos is simple structure of your speech. Any speech that can be essentially reduced to 3 main points is so much more powerful than the 11 points. Sub-points can be fitted into the 3, but keep it simple. Martin Luther King, everybody knows I have a dream speech. Yeah, I think there's a greater speech from the mountaintop. In Memphis, garbage collectors strike, and he goes to help them out. And he decides to tell the civil rights story his own way. And he says that 10 years before, he'd been stabbed by a deranged woman who missed his aorta by a millimeter. And the doctors told him if he had sneezed, he would have died. He told that story that night to the crowd. Said a lot of kings and presidents wrote him notes and all that, came to see him, whatever. He appreciated that. The thing he remembered was a note from an 11-year-old, happened to be a white girl from upper New York. And all it said was, "Dear Dr. King, I heard that if it was these, you would have died. I'm so glad, and we all are, that you died." They read that Saturday, and then he launched his way of telling the civil rights story. We do not have video in the sneeze speech. Not very well known. I think it's his greatest.
I want to say tonight that I too am happy that I didn't, because if I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1960 when students all over the South started sitting in lunch counters. And I knew that as they were sitting in, they were really standing up for the best in the American dream. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1962. When Negroes in Albany, Georgia decided to straighten their backs up. And whenever men and women straighten their backs up, they're going somewhere, because a man can't ride your back unless it is bent. If I wouldn't have had a chance later that year in August to try to tell America about a dream that I had had. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been down in Selma, Alabama to see the great movement. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been in Memphis to see a community rally around those brothers and sisters who are suffering. I'm so happy that I didn't sneeze.
There's an awful lot to be said for King as a rhetorician and advocate. He's certainly one of the best, a great themer. His cadence is sensational. A lot of it comes from the church in the South, but you know that. He's not trying to hide that or even learn it all. That's the way he taught. Terrific, terrific speech. Instead of telling the civil rights story, let's go back to 1948, this happened here, 1940, no. To do it all through, but if I sneezed, I would have missed it. And straightening up their backs, and all that great language was going on there. Dang, that's a ball player. Now, the end of the story is amazing. I don't have it here, but the last paragraph of that speech, 7 o'clock at night, Memphis, talking about the strike. He says, we've come a long way on civil rights. Not particularly profound way, of course, but we've got a long way to go. Okay, so far so good. And then he paused and said, fight hard, I'm not sure I'll be around to help you. That's the way that speech ended. And at 6 o'clock, the next night, he was shot and killed. The sneeze came. Where did it come? I don't see any hope. And he said, this may be it. He didn't know James Earl was going to come shooting. I don't know, that just looks that kind of premonition thing, not something I'm comfortable with. And you think that way. That's the way the speech is. This is it. Before we get to it. Prioritize. Keys to low structure, a few points. Prioritizing. Lead big. Lead with your most important point. Start and wrap strong. It's so important to get off to a good start in every speech. Why? Because your body relaxes, your voice box opens up. You start gesturing. You start saying to yourself, this is going all right. It's not what I woke up at 3 o'clock horrified about. I'm on a little bit of a roll. Start with a great story, a great anecdote, a great quote from history, something to start with. Wrap every speech. So here's what I've been trying to say. Of all the things I've just said, number one, a speech is not a red essay. That's my point. That's it. Just something to wrap and get off your feet with some strength. Dukakis? Come on. What if he says? A lot of people of good faith disagree with me about this, but I am against the death penalty in all cases. Let me tell you why. One, there have been 4 major studies by serious academicians that the death penalty is inherently discriminatory. That's a problem. 2, 12 international treaties have been torpedoed because the rest of the world doesn't agree with us. We are now up to, a UVA professor now proved, we're up to 238 people convicted, many of them capitally, when DNA evidence proves that they didn't do it. And importantly and finally, every constitution of every state in the United States is the job of governments to promote liberty, life, health, happiness. It's my view that the government has more exalted tasks than lobbing cyanide pills into jail cells. I believe it. I've always believed. That's my position. I think that's 12-year change in American history. Just say it, darn it. That's your case. F. Delivering your ditch the gosh darn notes. Yes, you can. Practice, practice, practice. And it's short. Do it. Relaxed and confident is your goal. Not cocky or not super sloppy with your hands all over the place, but confident and relaxed. Sure. Clinton is the god of the relaxed speaker. If Obama is this guy, and he is, Clinton, particularly when he's editorializing or making little asides, as he did in the Democratic convention, the speech as delivered was twice as long as the Republican counting words. And here's one of his, he just wanted to know a bit more.
Now, when Covington looked into that TV camera and attacked President Obama's Medicare savings as, quote, the biggest, coldest power play, I don't know whether to laugh or cry. Because that $716 billion is exactly, to the dollar, the same amount of Medicare savings that he had in his own budget.
Right here, clearing editorializing right now.
You got to get one thing. It takes them to attack a guy for doing what you did.
No way that was written down. He just wanted to know, and he had such a great fact. Brian was bitching about the $960 billion that's in his budget, and he knew it was a good one, but he hadn't milked it enough yet. Smiles and pauses, and that's just way over my confidence level. Take some brass. He's really good. Variety in gestures, movement, pace, volume, pitch. Obama's the star, and I thought, yes, we can again. I need to say just a couple words about feet and hands. The role of feet is to be in about this position. Not soldier, okay? Relax, kind of soft knees, we call it. Shoulder like and to not rock. This is your home position. But a lot of us like to walk, and I'm one. I walk too much. Fine. But walking should be in cadence with your point. It should match. It's only a step and a half. Stand. Get back to steady. What we really don't want is Geiger. He set the world's record. We don't want backwards rocking. We don't want side. We want you steady. This isn't me. This is the teaching of people in the field. And walking probably is a positive, good thing. Some people do not like to do it, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you're stuck here. For a long time, I can't do that. I like to get rid of the energy by these 1.5 foot walks. Pause, stop, back to home. Home for the hand. There are some places that are not good home bases. This is not good. The tummy tuck or squeeze. The audience is going to look at your hands. They're going to try to figure out if you're going to play the little kids' steeple game. And there's no power to it. This is not good. It's way too casual. This is.
It was the call of workers who organized.
Those are things that aren't good. What the theater people teach, and it's hard for me to do, I almost never do it, is to have as a home base something as neutral as actors neutral. That's what it's called. This is actors neutral. It's hands cupped, soft, right? Just sitting here. You're not doing anything negative with your hands now. That's much better than all of these other home bases. But almost all the time, come out of it. And when you come out of it with a variety of gestures. Right hand gesture, okay, fine. Left hand, fine. Both great. The power gesture, up and out, will tend to go with movement forward. Will tend to come at the ramp. Of everything I've said, here's the key point. And if we're right about this point, we must prevail. If we are wrong, we must lose. It's all this. Okay, that's going to be led with power gesture. I would never say things like that except with the ramp. And I have said, if I'm wrong about a point, I should lose. Because I think we're right on it. But that will tend to come with forward, out, pause, stop, make the point. And that has to be gestured. If we're wrong, we'll be got to have a power gesture for any sentence. The quest of the memorable is the next point I wrote down. Stories that are right on point. Yay. Memorable, wonderful, right on point. Anecdote. Sensory language rather than complicated. Pauses. Obama. The pause king. And he's really good at it. The absolute perfect sentence that you crafted and you love it and you know it makes the point. You don't have to worry about reading. You're gonna remember it every time. Every sentence in your speech that you love will always be remembered. We think we're gonna forget it. My God, I gotta take the speech up there with me. I might forget my great sentence. And they will tend to come as topic sentences or the last sentence. We don't forget. And they're worth it. Yes, wordsmithing is hugely important. I'm not trying to say it isn't. This is all just a game of getting up and waiting. It is not at all. The compelling thesis. Dukakis. What was great about that? FFFF. In this part, was probably the most important speech that I didn't know anything about. It. Almost nobody does. That probably won the Civil War for the good guys. The South had come up the west side of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Lee had tens of thousands, 30,000 exact. And the North never saw them coming until at midnight the night before Gettysburg. A sentry finally saw the Southern troops. So we were surprised. Big trouble. We lose day one, the Battle of Big Round Top. If we lose day two, a little round top, the South's going to win the war because they're very close to Washington. They just have to move a little bit east and it's over. The key to holding Round Top is Maine of all people. The Maine 13th Regiment is to protect the left flank. We have to protect the flank of Round Top. the night before, the Maine 13th had started. I believe that, they had lost 70% of their forces. I can't remember what they started, what they were down to. But they'd lost 70%. All the Maine men had been in much longer than they had contracted for. And they'd seen most of their colleagues killed. And they were hungry. And they were a mess. So after we lost Big Round Top, they threw all their muskets in a pile and said, oh, so we're leaving. And the next day we knew that the Alabama 13th was coming up the left, and they're big and they're powerful. And Maine was leaving. And the left was absolutely key. Late that night, between the two Round Tops, a professor of rhetoric from Bowdoin College, Joshua Temple, and a colonel later too, gave this speech, and we know, we don't have the video or audio, but this baby's been authenticated a number of times. It was essentially exactly this speech that changed America.
You know who we are, what we're doing here, but if you're going to fight alongside us, there's a few things I want. This regiment was formed last summer in Maine. There were 1,000 of us then. There are less than 300 of us now. All of us volunteered to fight for the Union, just as you did. Some came mainly because we were bored at home, thought this looked like it might be fun. Some came because we were ashamed not to. Many of us came because it was the right thing to do. And all of us have seen men die. This is a different kind of army. If you look back through history, you will see men fighting for pay, for women, or some other kind of loot, fight for land, power. Because they need them, or just because they like killing. We are here for something new. This has not happened much in the history of the world. We are an army out to set other men free. America should be free. All of it. Not divided by a line between slave state and free. All the way from here to the Pacific Ocean. No man has to bow. No man born to royalty. Here we by what you do, not by who your father was. Here you can be something. Here is the place to build a home. But it's not the land. There's always more land. It's the idea that we all have value. You and me. What we're fighting for, in the end, we're fighting for each other. Sorry, to me. You go ahead. You talk for a while. If you choose to join us, you want your muskets back, you can have them. Nothing more will be said by anybody anywhere. If you choose not to join us, well, you can come along under guard. When this is all over, I will do what I can to see you get a fair treatment. But for now, we'll be on. Gentlemen, I think if we lose this fight, we lose the war. So if you choose to join us, I'll be personally very grateful.
The end of that story is a wonderful story. They all picked up their muskets. They fought the next day. They were overwhelmed, outnumbered, didn't have enough ammunition. use whatever they had in their weapons by noon. And then they chased the Alabama 13th down the hill with their bayonets with no bullets and saved the left side, and we won. We, the Union, won. There's not a history book about the Civil War that doesn't agree that if the Maine 13th leaves, we lose. All they got to do, Lee's got everybody up there. All they got to do is go a little bit to lead. Just a couple words about the new rhetoric. Yes, the old rhetoric is the old thing. Aristotle and those characters did not have before them hundreds, maybe thousands of studies of human psyche. What makes people react to a speaker, good or bad, to each other? They didn't have that. They were intuiting it all. Hadn't been any psychological studies. We now have thousands of them. And that has led to a supplementation of classical rhetoric, which I'll cover very quickly. It deserves more time than this. It is not as important as classical rhetoric, but it's added to it. Here are its key points. Those are, they've left behind 4 canons too, or given us 4, just as Aristotle did. Canon of privacy. We are influenced most by what we think of a speaker and her cause right away. It's almost unshakable. If you like or don't like a speaker and are attracted to a position, a cause, a thesis, you're walking home. And the opposite is true. Canon of privacy. Nothing more important coming out of the literature dealing with the connection with an audience. You have to get around. Cannibalism, yeah. You can get off to a bad start and recover. I never saw a speaker do it. I've never seen in trial somebody get off to a bad start and think again. Probably happens sometime, I never saw it. Canon of recency. But we remember best what we hear last. The jury's going to take into the room every time. That's what you're today. You're going to remember probably how this ends. Put those two babies together. Start and stop and end great. As big as you can. As engaging as you can. As powerful as you can. As whatever you're going to be. There. Start big. End big. Canon of frequency. Most people need to hear important things more than once. The key is to figure out how to say something twice that's important without sounding repetitive. Do it at a different part of the speech. Different words to describe it. You can't let a 4-month trial come down to did they get X one time. Nope. Better get it in there 3 times. Canon of vividness. Here's the key chart of all of the new rhetoric, maybe of all of the rhetoric period, is this chart. If people only hear a speech and are tested 3 days later, this has been done many times, an audience, a typical audience will remember 10% if they've only heard something. If, though, folks see something, look at that, it's getting pretty good. They will remember, but don't hear it, just see it. 35% retention 3 days later. It's good fact. Look at the video. If people get stuff through their ears and their eyes, it is amazing. 2/3 of it. 3. Hence the power of great pictures, of film clips, of the speaker who's able to paint a picture with sensory workshop that can make you visualize something. We can do that, and audiences can do the visualizing. If you, it's hard. That's a mark of a really great advocate. But all right, if you can get to a combo, people are going to remember. They'll also remember what goes wrong. I mean, if the eyes and ears are saying no, that's indulgent. Well, that all comes in psychology and these points. We have amazingly short attention spans. The average attention span, even in this room, is 3 to 4 minutes at a pop. Therefore, the challenge of the advocate is to get it back by tricks like I'm doing, neat film clips, somehow, by pausing, by setting it up with cadence, by saying things like this next point is the most important point in the case. Without begging them, I want my 3 minutes back. If there are ways to say, I want my 3 minutes back right now, because this baby's a killer. We are saying processors, we can only process one thought at a time, no matter how smart you are. The wicked time from psych class, I mean, nobody can see this as 2 black faces and a white face at the exact same moment. You have to make a choice. The human mind, of course, consecutively, you see, make a choice. Therefore, the important, clear, simple, boom, 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 it's the way we think. We are single, that's what the psychologists call it, single path processors. Biases, watch out for just relishing into biases. They're out there. The Disaster Hall of Fame, and I basically will end with this, is the bridge too far. Making the argument you didn't have to make. Pushing an argument too far. To the point that an audience says, I like this woman first. I trust her. I like her argument. I like her thesis. But now she's pushed it out here. And what the mind is going to say is she must need me to agree to this out on the edge, believe to the degree, or she wouldn't have made that point. Well, I don't agree with her out there. Therefore, there goes the entire thesis. The beginning of the argument in Roe against Wade, the first time it was argued, it started like this.
We'll hear arguments number 18, Roe against Wade. Mrs. Weddington, you may proceed whenever you're ready.
Mr. Justice, and may it please the court. I think it's without question that pregnancy to a woman can completely disrupt her life. It disrupts her body, it disrupts her education, it disrupts her employment, and it often disrupts her entire family life. And we feel that because of the impact on the woman, this certainly, in as far as there are any rights which are fundamental, is a matter which is of such fundamental and basic concern to the woman involved that she should be allowed to make the choice as to whether to continue or to terminate her pregnancy.
Court split 4-4 with 1 to kill with that start. And I'm saying, I heard it. I'm saying, why? You need to go with 9 grandfathers, old fellows, none of whom, so far as we know it, had the issue of abortion or not come up in their families ever. Why go there? Abortion is really disruptive. Pregnancies is very disruptive. Why? Why don't you say to most people, they would support most of the time? Pregnancy is an exalted one. For many, a religious experience. It is for most people most of the time. We are here because it's not always true. For some people, because of psychological problems, horrible financial problems, already have more kids to take care of, whatever. All kinds of different people with different problems. You don't need a black and white government rule of never, ever. It should be up to that person's medicine, partner, doctor. Has to be left up. You're the only place we can turn for the answer to that question. Why did you start there? And she did it the second time. Actually, she's a good friend of mine. I always feel like I'm being mean. She's 23 years old. She had her 20 in the courtroom. She was doing the case pro bono ceremony. Very able person, but boy, did she get off. Complexity bad. The rest of the Hall of Fame. Way too emotional, mean-spirited, bored, arrogant. Humility is a wonderful thing. I'll end with 1 more minute just because I really do end with Chuck Ruff, who was a great advocate. Well, I think the best oral advocate of my generation was from this firm. But he had to go become counsel to the President Clinton before he had ever heard of Monica Lewinsky. And he got the job of defending the President from the conviction phase of impeachment. He's in a wheelchair because he was disabled. While in the Peace Corps, contracted some dread disease. Wonderful guy. Just listen to a couple minutes of this at a time.
We are not here to defend William Clinton, the man. He, like all of us, will find his judges elsewhere. We are here to defend William Clinton, the President of the United States, for whom you are the only judges. You are free to criticize him, to find his personal conduct distasteful, but ask whether this is the man for the first time in our history. The actions of a president have so put at risk the government the framers created that there is only one solution. You must find not merely that removal is an acceptable option, that we will be okay the day after you vote. You must find that it's the only solution, that our democracy should not be made to sustain 2 more years of this president's service. You must put that question because the one thing that our form of government cannot abolish is the notion that impeachment is merely one more weapon the Congress can use in the contest between the legislative and executive branches. Let me be very clear. We do not believe that President Clinton committed any of the offenses charged by the managers. And for the reasons we'll set out at length over the next 2 days, we believe the managers have misstated the record, have constructed their case out of tenuous extrapolations without foundation, have at every turn assumed the worst without the evidence to support their speculations. You put these lawyers in a courtroom and they win 10 times out of 10. But suppose we're wrong. Suppose that you find that the president committed one or more of the offenses that the managers have charged. Then there remains only one issue before you. Whatever your feelings may be about William Clinton, a man, or William Clinton, the political ally or opponent, or William Clinton, the father and the husband, ask only this: should William Clinton, the president, be removed from office? Are we at that horrific moment in our history when our union can be preserved only by taking the step that the framers saw as a last resort? I'm never certain how to respond when an advocate on the other side of the case calls up patriots over the centuries who sacrificed themselves to preserve our democracy. I have no personal experience with war. I've only visited Normandy as a tourist. But I do know this. My father was on Omaha Beach 55 years ago. And I know how he would feel if he were dead. He didn't fight, no one fought for one side of this or the other. He fought as all those did for our country, our Constitution. And as long as each of us, manager, President's Counsel, does his or her constitutional duty, those who fought for their country will be proud. We, the people of the United States, have formed a more perfect union. We've formed it, we nurtured it, we've seen it grow. We have not been perfect, and it is perhaps the most extraordinary thing about our Constitution that it thrives despite our human imperfections. When the American people hear the President talk to Congress tonight, they will know the answer to the question, neighbor, how stands the Union? It stands strong, vibrant, free.
Another very important speech he needed to influence foremost to avoid conviction of the president as ouster of the president's